We used to think the stars were silent, a vast, beautiful emptiness waiting for our ships to pierce the dark. We were fools. The universe is not empty, it is crowded, old, and terrified. Deep within the abyssal void, things exist that defy reason, cosmic entities that eat stars and crush civilizations like dust. They do not know pain, they do not know mercy, and they do not fear death. But they fear us. They fear what we became when the dark tried to swallow us whole. Welcome to Zenith Imperium. Subscribe now, and make sure you watch this until the absolute end, because what you are about to hear will forever change how you look at the night sky. The ancient ones had names that human tongues were never meant to speak, syllables that vibrated through the hull of our scout ships like a dying heartbeat. For eons, the galaxy belonged to them. They moved through the cold vacuum like leviathans in a deep, sunless ocean, dragging entire solar systems into their wake, feeding on the gravitational bleed of collapsing realities. When the first human colony fleets left Sol, we were small, fragile things wrapped in sheets of alloy and burning primitive fuel. The elder gods barely noticed us. To them, humanity was just another flash of brief, insignificant biological static, a momentary spark destined to freeze in the endless winter of space. They had watched 1,000,000 empires rise and fall, watched species far older and wiser than us weep and beg for mercy before being dissolved into the cosmic soup. They believed we would do the same. But they did not understand the architecture of the human mind, nor did they realize that our fragility was a lie. We were not prey waiting to be consumed. We were a species born from a chaotic, violent crucible, carrying a spark of absolute defiance that the universe had never witnessed before. When the entity known as the Screaming Maw drifted into the Orion Arm and swallowed the colony world of New Eldon, it expected a harvest of terror. It expected the psychic screams of billions of dying primates to fuel its eternal hunger. Instead, as its shadow fell over the atmosphere and the oceans began to boil upward into the vacuum, it felt something else. It felt a cold, calculated resistance. The humans did not pray to the entity. They did not bow. Down in the bunkers, beneath a crust that was melting into glass, human engineers were not weeping. They were calibrating. They looked up at a creature that spanned the diameter of a gas giant, a nightmare of shifting geometry and eyes that burned with the light of dead galaxies, and they did not see a god. They seen a target. In those final, desperate hours, the first true seed of the Zenith Imperium was planted. We realized that if the universe was ruled by monsters, we would have to become the thing that monsters see when they have nightmares. We did not panic, we adapted, weaponizing the very madness the void tried to infect us with. Before New Eldon was completely consumed, the colony launched a single, massive kinetic slug directly into the entity's primary sensory cluster, a parting gift of pure, unadulterated human spite that shattered a portion of its crystalline mass and sent a shockwave of genuine agony through its immortal consciousness. For the first time in 10 billion years, a god of the void bled. It was a microscopic wound, nothing more than a scratch on the hide of an immortal titan, but it changed everything. It proved that they could be hurt. It proved that their cosmic authority was not absolute. The surviving human fleets did not scatter in fear. They converged, pulling together into a singular, weaponized collective driven by an obsessive, generational desire for retribution. We stopped looking at the stars with wonder and started looking at them through a crosshair. If you want to understand how a species of flesh and bone forced the immortal rulers of the cosmos to retreat into the shadows, you must stay with us until the very final second of this broadcast. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Zenith Imperium to join our ranks. The bleeding god retreated into the deep dark, its massive, shifting form leaving a trail of corrupted gravity waves that scarred space for light years. But humanity did not forget, and we did not heal. We transformed. The Zenith Imperium was forged not out of a desire for peace or exploration, but out of a collective, cold-blooded resolution that we would never be helpless again. We tore apart our own colony worlds for raw materials, turning entire planets into automated factories that bled black smoke into foreign skies. We abandoned our old philosophies, our trivial conflicts, and our fragile moralities, fusing our souls with the cold, unyielding logic of total militarization. If the cosmos was a meat grinder, we were going to be the ones turning the crank. Our scientists stopped studying biology to cure disease. They studied it to see how much cosmic radiation a human soldier could endure before their flesh dissolved. We engineered our children to possess nervous systems that could handle the crushing G-forces of inertial dampener failure, and we replaced our fragile eyes with cybernetic optics that could map the invisible, multidimensional anatomy of the void dwellers. We became a species of ghosts, living inside armored hulls, illuminated only by the harsh, green glow of tactical displays. For 2 centuries, we remained hidden, letting the galaxy believe the Orion Arm had fallen silent, allowing the elder entities to drift back into their arrogant slumber. But we were watching them through hidden arrays of stealth satellites, tracing their migratory paths across the stars, cataloging their weaknesses, and measuring the exact output of their psychic terrors. We discovered that these entities operated on frequencies of fear that usually paralyzed biological brains, overriding the survival instinct and forcing creatures to walk willingly into their open maws. So, we built the Aegis Grid. We created neural dampeners that completely severed the human emotional center during combat, turning our soldiers into walking blocks of absolute ice. When a Zenith dreadnought entered a corrupted system, the crew felt nothing. No awe, no horror, no despair. They only felt the heavy, rhythmic thrum of the sublight engines and the singular desire to execute the fire mission. When the entity known as the Weaver of Flesh drifted toward the mining outposts of the Perseus Ridge, it expected to find another easy feast of trembling organic life. It uncoiled its massive, hyperdimensional tendrils, reaching down through the upper atmosphere to unravel the DNA of every living thing below, anticipating the sweet, chaotic static of a dying ecosystem. Instead, its tendrils struck a wall of solid energy. The Zenith Imperium had enclosed the entire star system in a network of localized gravity anchors, pinning the planet in place and creating a localized reality bubble that defied the entity's reality-warping presence. From the dark side of the moon, 50 Goliath-class supercarriers uncloaked simultaneously. They did not broadcast demands. They did not ask for peace. They opened their missile bays, releasing a swarm of antimatter torpedoes that burned with the fury of trapped suns. The Weaver of Flesh tried to project a wave of psychological agony, a psychic scream meant to liquefy the brains of the attackers, but the signal hit the cold, mechanical wall of our neural dampeners and shattered into useless noise. The human crews looked at the god through their viewports, their heart rates remaining at a steady, resting 60 beats per minute. They pulled the triggers. The vacuum of space lit up in a horrific, beautiful display of cascading detonations as the antimatter tore through the entity's ethereal flesh, ripping its multidimensional geometry into bleeding, physical fragments that froze instantly in the absolute zero of the void. The god tried to escape, to slip back into the safety of the extra-dimensional rift from which it had crawled, but the Zenith Imperium had already calculated the coordinates of the tear. We didn't just want to defend ourselves, we wanted to hunt. The wounded god shrieked on frequencies that shattered the glass of our unshielded monitors, a silent, desperate wail that rippled through the fabric of the local continuum. It tried to fold space, to dissolve its compromised physical manifestation, and retreat into the infinite safety of the higher dimensions where humans could not follow. But the Zenith Imperium had anticipated the cowardice of immortals. Before the rift could seal, 3 massive interdiction rings, each the size of a minor moon, transitioned out of warp and locked into a triangular formation around the dying entity. These were not weapons of destruction, they were anchors of absolute reality. They generated a localized field of hyperdense gravitational pressure that hardened space itself, turning the fluid, shifting dimensions into a rigid, inescapable cage of 3-dimensional physics. The Weaver of Flesh was trapped. For the first time in its eternal existence, it was subjected to the cruel, unyielding laws of linear time and physical vulnerability. Its thrashing grew frantic, its massive, iridescent tentacles slamming against the invisible boundaries of the gravity cage, sending violent distortions through the surrounding asteroid belts. The human fleet did not hesitate. The supercarriers held their positions, their automated manufacturing bays working at maximum capacity to load the next wave of ordnance. On the bridge of the flagship Iron Resolve, the commanders did not celebrate. They watched the god struggle with the detached, clinical interest of scientists observing a specimen under a microscope. To the Zenith Imperium, this was not a holy war, nor was it a struggle for survival anymore. It was a harvesting operation. We had realized that the flesh of these cosmic entities, the very material that defied the laws of traditional physics, contained exotic matter that could power our civilization for millennia. Their blood was a superconductor that could stabilize artificial wormholes. Their crystalline neural nodes could process data at speeds that made our quantum computers look like abacuses. We were no longer just defending our borders, We were hunting the gods for their resources. The order was given to deploy the harvester ships. These were massive, brutal structures of black iron and tungsten, equipped with industrial-grade plasma cutters and magnetic containment fields designed to rip an entity apart while it was still breathing. As the harvesters closed the distance, their massive mechanical claws extending into the void, the weaver of flesh realized the true nature of its predators. The humans were not looking for salvation. They were looking for meat. The entity tried to morph, to reshape its geometry into a form so horrific that it would bypass our mechanical dampeners and strike directly at the primitive, instinctual core of the human DNA. It projected images of cosmic extinction, of dead universes, of the inevitable decay of all matter. But the human soldiers looking through their cybernetic optics did not see the end of days. They saw structural weak points. They saw fracturing energy matrices. They fired the plasma lances, burying beams of superheated gas miles deep into the entity's core. The god of the void, a being that had witnessed the birth of stars, began to break apart. Its outer membranes dissolved into clouds of glowing, radioactive dust, which our containment ships immediately began to vacuum into their cargo holds. The central consciousness of the entity, a dense, pulsating sphere of pure gravitational energy, tried to implode to trigger a supernova that would take the human fleet with it. But the Zenith engineers were faster. They launched a series of stasis darts, experimental weapons that froze the atomic motion within the core, halting the explosion mid-collapse. The immortal was dead, its corpse neatly compartmentalized, catalogued, and prepped for transport back to the core worlds of the Imperium. As the fleet reformed, the sensors picked up a strange phenomenon. The local vacuum, usually humming with the distant, oppressive telepathic background noise of the void dwellers, had gone completely silent. The other entities, the ancient brothers and sisters of the creature we had just butchered, had gone quiet. They were hiding. They had realized that the dynamic of the galaxy had fundamentally shifted. The sheep had not only grown teeth, they had built a slaughterhouse. The silence that followed the slaughter of the weaver of flesh was heavier than any atmospheric pressure we had ever encountered. Across the vast, uncharted sectors of the deep void, the background radiation of the cosmos changed. The chaotic, mocking telepathic whispers that had haunted human deep space pilots for generations simply vanished, replaced by a cold, trembling stillness. The gods of the dark had realized that we were no longer hiding in our small, fragile corner of the galaxy. The Zenith Imperium was expanding, and our borders were written in the blood of immortals. We pushed outward, into the ancient star clusters where no biological life had ever dared to tread. We found planets made of black glass, ruins of alien empires that had been wiped from existence by a single thought of the elder entities. On these dead worlds, we did not build memorials, we built fortresses. We mined the ruins for ancient knowledge, combining our own aggressive technology with the forgotten sciences of the dead, creating a hybrid war machine that was half flesh, half iron, and entirely lethal. Our scouts reported that the entities were no longer traveling alone. The Ancient Ones, beings that had spent eons in solitary isolation, fighting each other for cosmic dominance, were now clustering together in the deepest trenches of space. They were forming alliances out of pure, unadulterated terror. They had witnessed what we did to the Weaver, and they knew that if they remained divided, the human harvester fleets would systematically hunt them to extinction. The ultimate test of our resolve came in the dread sector, known as the Eye of the Abyss. It was a region of space where reality was thin, a massive graveyard of dead stars where the largest of the void gods, an entity known in ancient alien myths as the Star Eater, had made its lair. This creature was not a mere predator. It was a living cataclysm, a mass of hyperdense dark matter and shifting, nightmare geometry that stretched across an entire solar system. It had consumed 1,000 worlds, and its hunger was infinite. As the Zenith Vanguard fleet entered the sector, the space around us began to warp and twist. The stars in the distance distorted, bending around an invisible, colossal weight. Suddenly, the vacuum fractured. The Star Eater emerged from the dark, but it was not alone. Flanking it were dozens of lesser entities, a horde of cosmic horrors, shifting masses of eyes, tentacles, and claws made of hardened light, all moving in a synchronized, desperate charge against the human fleet. The psychic pressure was so immense that even with our neural dampeners at maximum capacity, the hulls of our ships began to groan, the metal vibrating in sympathy with the cosmic rage of the gods. The space around us turned into a tempest of raw, uncontrolled energy. But the Zenith Imperium did not break formation. We had not come to defend a border. We had come to claim an empire. The fleet commanders looked at the approaching wall of cosmic nightmares, their faces illuminated by the flashing red lights of the proximity alarms. They did not feel fear. They felt the cold, sharp exhilaration of the ultimate apex predator. The order was given to activate the Zenith core, our newest and most terrifying weapon. We had taken the captured gravitational nucleus of the Weaver of Flesh and reverse-engineered it, creating a device that could temporarily rewrite the laws of physics on a system-wide scale. When the core activated, the chaotic, reality-warping powers of the Void Gods were instantly neutralized. The shifting geometry of the Star Eater hardened into a solid, vulnerable mass of physical matter. The Horde of Horrors was stripped of its immortality, dragged down into the harsh, uncompromising realm of flesh and bone. They were no longer gods. They were just targets. The final battle for the Eye of the Abyss was not a war of gods. It was an industrial execution. As the Zenith core locked the entities into the rigid cage of physical reality, the human fleet unleashed a barrage of kinetic and thermonuclear devastation that shattered the vacuum. Our supercarriers fired spinal-mounted railguns, launching slugs of collapsed matter at fractions of the speed of light, punching holes through the solidified hides of creatures that had once walked through stars unharmed. The lesser entities were ripped apart in seconds, their multidimensional forms exploding into showers of mundane, freezing biological matter. The Star Eater itself, a titan of dark matter, roared a physical sound that shook the hulls of our dreadnoughts as its outer layers were stripped away by the unrelenting fury of human artillery. It reached out with its remaining colossal tendrils, trying to crush the flagship Iron Resolve, but we met its flesh with the burning edge of our plasma shields. The metal of our ships glowed white-hot, our structural integrity dropping to critical levels, but the human crews stayed at their stations. Their fingers were steady on the firing keys, their cybernetic eyes locked onto the structural fractures spreading across the god's massive core. We did not give an inch. We drove our ships directly into the gaping maw of the beast, firing directly into its throat from point-blank range. The interior of the Star Eater became a furnace of antimatter detonations. The entity collapsed inward, its ancient, cosmic consciousness fracturing under the sheer, unyielding weight of human violence. When the dust finally settled, the Eye of the Abyss was clear. The gods were dead, their corpses drifting like broken icebergs in the cold, silent dark. The Zenith Imperium had won. We stood atop the ruins of the cosmos, the undisputed apex predators of the galaxy. We looked out into the deeper, uncharted void beyond the galactic rim, into the infinite dark where other universes, other gods lay hidden. We knew they were out there, watching the sudden, terrifying silence of our galaxy, realizing that something new had woken up in the dark. We are no longer the fragile children of Earth, hiding under a blanket of atmosphere, praying to the sky for salvation. We are the architects of a new order, an empire forged in defiance of the universe itself. The stars belong to us now, not because we were chosen, but because we had the absolute malice and the engineering genius to take them by force. Let the outer gods watch from the dark. Let them tremble in their ancient thrones. Because the Zenith Imperium is coming for them, and we are bringing the slaughterhouse.